The Lost Camel. There is an ancient Islamic saying, "Faith is the lost camel of the believer," and it has been said that this is an allusion to this very tale. In such a sense, of course, the lost camel symbolizes faith, and its traces are held to be visible to certain specially endowed individuals, and not to others. The version given here, however, is on the political level, where the king realizes that people who can observe signs which others cannot would be useful at court, and he employs them accordingly. The story is also used in some Eastern circles in a more abbreviated form to test the reactions of the audience, much as a modern psychologist would, to discover what the mentality of the hearer is through what interpretation he puts on the story. There are many tales within a tale extant which record how various potential disciples have reacted to the story. Some have said that it constitutes a sort of early detective story, others that it underlines the existence of specially endowed individuals who roam this earth performing perceptive functions about which most people are unaware. In some stories, the plot forms the basis of an unjust accusation of theft. The travellers know too much about the camel not to be thought its thieves. One telling ends with the interpretation that things are not what they seem, and another is used to encourage children to develop their powers of observation for personal advantage later in life. Most of the instrumental and interpretive functions of the folk tale have tended to be overlooked in the literature, which still usually concentrates upon origins, upon fragmentary beliefs enshrined in the tales, and upon the light which is cast by plots and treatments on the attitudes of the peoples among whom the story is told. In India, at the time of Alakpuri's greatest power, there dwelt in it a great king whose name was Alakesa, and he was famous for all the riches which land and sea can yield. During his reign, the cow and the tiger drank side by side from the same pool, and the parrot and the kite, the Indian scavenger bird, laid their eggs in the same nest. Rain refreshed the soil when it was needed, and all King Alakesa's subjects lived like brothers in peace, plenty, and happiness. Now there was in Alakapuri a rich merchant who lost his camel one day. He searched for it for a long time without success, until he reached another city, called Mathurapuri, the king of which was named Mathuresa. There were 4 ministers of that country, called Bodhadita, Bodhachandra, Bodhavyapta, and Bodhavibhishana. For some reason, they had become dissatisfied with their positions at court and decided to quit the city. As they journeyed along, they observed the tracks of a camel, and each made some remark about the animal, judging by its footsteps and other indications on the road. Presently they met the merchant who was searching for his camel. "Masters," said he, "have you met a camel anywhere in the direction from which you have come?" One wise man asked, "Was it lame in one of its legs?" "Yes, indeed," said he. "And was it not blind in one eye?" said the second wise man. "The right eye?" "Yes, it was," said he. "Was its tail unusually short?" asked the third. Yes, then you have seen it," exclaimed the merchant. "Was it not suffering from colic too?" interposed the fourth wise man. Yes, it was, but where is it now?" asked the merchant, in some distress. "We have not seen it," the first courtier said, "but we have observed its progress along the road." "Observed it? But please explain," cried the merchant. "We cannot possibly tell you where it is. We are all now on our way to the court of King Alakesa," replied the traveller. "But if you will come with us, we will give you the explanation of our findings." So the merchant had no choice but to go with them to the king, Alakesa, and complain that the 4 men had stolen his beast and hidden it somewhere. The king was sure that the men must know something about the whereabouts of the camel, since they had given a complete description of it. "You are all threatened with my displeasure," said he, "if you do not tell me the whole truth. According to what you shall now say, I will make judgment." The first traveller said, "I noticed, when first seeing the footprints of the camel on the side of the road, that one of the footmarks was deficient. Therefore I concluded that the animal was lame." "Good," said the king. "And you, Bodhichandra, what have you to say?" "I noticed that the leaves on the left-hand side of the road had been snapped or torn off," said the second courtier. "Therefore it was obvious that the camel was blind of his right eye." The third said, "I saw drops of blood on the road which I conjecture had fallen from the bites of gnats or flies. Therefore I thought the camel's tail was shorter than usual, as it could not brush the pests away." The fourth said, "I observed that whilst the forefeet of the animal were planted firmly on the ground, the hind ones seemed scarcely to have touched it, whence I guessed that they were contracted by pain in the body of the camel." When the king heard these explanations, he was struck by the wisdom of the 4 men and the logic of their replies. "Well spoken," said he, "and I will compensate you, merchant, for the loss of your camel, as it obviously will not be found easily. You 4 young men from Mathapuri, I beg to remain here and become my counsellors, for I have great need of your intelligence." And so they came to the court of the great king, becoming ministers of great importance. The Beggar and the Gazelle. One of the best-known stories in the English-speaking world is Puss in Boots, which came to Britain through the translation of Perrault's Le Chat Botté of 1697. Perrault, writing as he did for the French court, prettified this story, and the current storybook form is much distorted. The story is an Eastern one, and appeared in Italy as early as the 16th century. It was known in a French literary translation from Straparola a century before Perrault took it over. The tale has annoyed many people in the West, because they have disliked, as did Madame de Maintenon, its supposed lack of a moral. On the surface, of course, it looks as if a beggar, or a young miller without a penny, as in the Puss in Boots version, has no right to advantages obtained for him by a cat through trickery. But in the Eastern telling, it is easier to see that the animal stands for the fate which constantly gives humanity, in spite of its unworthiness, great opportunities. The ingratitude of the main figure is thus characteristic of man's forgetfulness of a debt. The defection of the princess symbolizes the withdrawal of the advantages which subsist, according to this idea, only when appreciated by a worthwhile person. The story is well known in the Middle East, where the man is known as Hamadani, and the variant given here is current in substantially similar form in Zanzibar and East Africa, as well as in the Near East. Once upon a time, there was a poor beggar who slept upon the outside oven of a rich man's kitchen. One morning he was awakened by the cries of a vendor who was calling, "Gazelles! Gazelles! Buy my fine miniature gazelles!" The beggar said, "There is no one awake at this hour in the rich man's house. Cease from your noise until a more civilized hour, brother." The gazelle seller, who had several of the poor creatures in a cage on top of a donkey cart, replied, "Would you like to buy one of these fine gazelles?" "I have only a handful of coppers," said the beggar. "What would I do with a gazelle anyway?" And he climbed down off the oven to talk to the gazelle seller. At that moment, one of the small animals poked its head out of the cage and said in a low voice to the beggar, whose name was Mustafa, "Buy me, and you will not be sorry." Mustafa was so astonished that he said to the gazelle seller, "Here is all I have in the world, 3 copper coins. Can I buy this gazelle with its head out of the cage for that?" "Take it and be blessed," cried the man, and released the gazelle. "As I shall otherwise only have to feed the thing, I shall let it go for whatever you can give me." Then he closed the cage again, took 3 coppers from Mustafa, and went on his way to the nearest coffee house. "Well," said Mustafa to the gazelle, "what about it? I have bought you, and now I have nothing left in the world until I can get something more sitting on the steps of the mosque at the time of the midday prayer." "You will not regret buying me," said the gazelle, "for I shall make your fortune." "How is that?" cried Mustafa. "And what shall I do next?" "Do nothing. Simply stay here until I return," said the gazelle, and it trotted away. The tattered beggar scratched his head. He would probably never see the wretched animal again, he thought. How did he allow himself to be so deluded as to give his 3 copper coins for a talking gazelle? Probably the creature was bewitched and might bring him bad luck. So ruminating, he sat down again on the oven to wait until the rich man's servants woke, hoping that then perhaps they would throw out some food that he could eat. Meanwhile, the gazelle ran on until it reached the tent of a noble sheikh. It bowed to him and said, "O sheikh of 1,000 tents, I am the slave of a great and noble merchant whose caravan has just been attacked and plundered by thieves. Could you please send some clothes for him to put on, so that he may not have to appear before you completely naked when he comes to pay you a visit?" "Certainly, good gazelle," said the sheikh. "My servant shall give you a white linen shirt and a robe of the finest camel hair to take to your master. And when he has recovered from his shock, let him come here to my encampment, so that I may cause a sheep to be roasted in his honor." So the gazelle thanked the sheikh and said, "I was to bring you this emerald in payment of any clothes which you might send, as my master does not wish to accept your kindness for nothing." Thereupon the gazelle placed an emerald without flaw at the feet of the sheikh, and bounded away with the clothes upon its back. The sheikh was delighted at the value of the gift, and resolved that if the man did appear, he would offer him the hand of his daughter, for he was apparently a person of great substance. The gazelle went back to Mustafa and said, "Look, I have brought you clothes from a rich sheikh. Cast off your rags, bathe in the river, and put on these magnificent garments." The beggar was amazed and said, "How in the world did you manage to do this? Never in my life have I seen such beautiful clothes." "Do as I tell you," said the gazelle, "and I shall get you a rich wife as well. Did you not give me back my liberty by buying me from the man who had put me in a cage?" The long and short of it was that the clothes transformed the beggar into a man who could sit in a royal court without shame. "Now follow me," said the gazelle, and trotted off into a ruined building. "Look under the 3rd brick on the left, and you will see a treasure." Sure enough, as Mustafa lifted the brick, he saw the gleam of gold and precious stones in a cavity below. He filled his pockets and his money belt until he had as much as he could carry. "What a piece of luck!" cried the beggar. "I shall never have to go without anything for the rest of my days." "Not if you marry into the family of the sheikh of 1,000 tents," said the gazelle. "Buy yourself a horse and boots, and we shall set out for the noble sheikh's oasis at once." An hour later, Mustafa, mounted on a beautiful white horse, followed the gazelle as it sped along like the wind before him. Soon they reached a dip in the sand, and in the distance, beside some tall palm trees, were some black tents. "Wait here," said the gazelle, "until I come for you. and remember that you are now the Sheikh Abu Zakat, a rich merchant whose caravan has been set upon by thieves and plundered." "I understand," said Mustafa. "I shall stay here until you return." The gazelle then descended into the valley of the oasis and, presenting himself to the Sheikh of 1,000 Tents, let fall a priceless ruby without flaw at his feet, saying, "My master, the noble Sheikh Abu Zakat, sends you blessings and peace, and requests that he may call upon you at once to thank you for the clothes you sent him after his recent misfortune. In the meantime, here is a small token of his regard which he wishes to give to your daughter as a mark of his respect." "Excellent gazelle," cried the Sheikh. "Let your master hasten here as fast as he can, for I am eager to meet him, and he should start thinking of himself as my son-in-law from this moment." The gazelle returned to the Sheikh Abu Zakat and acquainted him of what the Sheikh of 1,000 Tents had said, and soon the one-time beggar and the rich and venerable Sheikh were sitting together drinking coffee like old friends. By nightfall, when the sheep had been roasted and eaten, the Sheikh of 1,000 Tents came to the delicate subject of his daughter. "My son," said he, placing his hand on Sheikh Abu Zakat's arm, "I am glad that I have kept my daughter unmarried until you came along, for I can think of no more suitable match for her. I shall arrange for the marriage rites to be solemnized tomorrow, and she shall come to you with her servants and her finery all complete." At this news the Sheikh Abu Zakat was delighted, and thanked his lucky stars for bringing him such fortune. Next day, at the wedding, he was congratulated by every member of the tribe, who each piled gifts before the happy pair. The bridal feast went on for 12 hours, and at last they were led to a black tent hung with rare carpets and decorated with lamps of burnished brass set with coral. While they slept, the gazelle lay across the threshold, keeping watch. The months passed, and the tribe moved to another oasis, so the Sheikh of 1,000 Tents gave his daughter and new son-in-law his palace in the desert to live in until his return. There were tinkling fountains in blue-tiled courtyards, carved wooden balconies, vast rooms with painted pillars. The Sheikh Abu Zakat became more and more conceited and forgot completely what he owed to the gazelle. He spent all day playing knucklebones with his friends. One day the gazelle went to its mistress and said, "Lady, ask my master if he will give me a bowl of dates and honey, prepared with his own hands, for I am feeling ill and fear that I may die." So the girl went to her husband and said, "Peace be upon you, husband. Please give the gazelle a bowl of dates and honey prepared with your own hands, as it is ill and fears that it may die." And the man answered, "Foolish one, do not worry about the animal. Did I not buy it for only a few pence? Take no notice, and leave me to my game of knucklebones." Then the girl went back to the gazelle, which was lying on the ground looking very weak and thin, and said, "I cannot get your master to come. Shall I prepare the mixture myself so that you will get better?" The gazelle said, "No, mistress, thank you. I would rather that my master did it. Please go back to him and beg him for my sake to do as I ask, or I shall die." So she ran back to Sheikh Abu Zakat and said, "Come quickly. The gazelle begs you to do as it asks, or indeed it will die, for it is now so weak and thin lying on the ground." But again her husband would not do anything, and told her to go to the gazelle and give it a bowl of milk herself. When the girl got back to where the gazelle was lying, she saw its eyes were very dull, and when she had told it the sheikh was not coming, it dropped its head and died. That night, lying in his luxurious palace, the man who had been a beggar said to his wife, "What happened to the gazelle? You did not come back to tell me." And she answered sadly, "It died, and I am so grieved at the way you disregarded the poor creature's pleas that I have decided when my father comes back I shall return to his tents, for I no longer love you." "Foolish woman," cried the sheikh. "Go to sleep, and in the morning you will have forgotten all about this matter." Within a few moments he was snoring. In the middle of the night he had a dream. He thought he saw the gazelle again, and its eyes were very sad. "Why did you not bring me a bowl of dates and honey when I begged you to do so? Had you forgotten that you owed all your good fortune to me? I was grateful because you bought my liberty back for me. Why could you not show me one act of kindness when I was in need?" "I asked my wife to take you a bowl of milk," cried the Sheikh Abu Zakat, feeling suddenly very ashamed of himself. "It was not the same thing," said the gazelle faintly, and it disappeared. In a great fright, the Sheikh Abu Zakat sat up and found himself Mustafa the beggar again, dressed in tatters, sitting against the outdoor oven of a rich man's house in the moonlight. The apple on the boy's head. William Tell is said, in 1296, to have shot an apple from the head of his son when an enraged governor challenged him to do so for refusing to salute his hat, symbol of alien authority. The story, however, is not related of Tell until 1499 AD, 2 centuries after the incident. But it does appear in the Old Norse Vilkina saga, and 300 years before William Tell, in the saga of St. Olaf. 100 years ago, the Swiss themselves decided that the story was legendary, though a man named Freudenberger had been buried alive by the canton of Uri in the early 18th century for claiming the legend to be of Danish origin. Tradition indeed ascribes the arrow incident to Palnatoke, bodyguard of Harold Bluetooth, in 950 AD. Some discomfort has been occasioned by the statement, in the Icelandic saga, that the original apple target idea was suggested by a Christian saint who wished to convert the heathen hero Eindridi. Apart from these considerations, the tale itself might well be seen to highlight the problems of category definitions in the field of tales. Is it, for instance, a myth relating to the Nordic gods, said to be of Hordur in the Edda? Is it a legend of William of Cloudesley of Britain, as it appears in the Ballad of Adam Bell? As a fairy tale, it belongs among the Marken to amuse, but as a didactic fable, it would inculcate principles. Some, on the other hand, see it as an allegory, that is, a fabulous but indicating some history. It does not help matters that this fascinating idea is very common to others than, as Sir George Dasent has claimed, the whole Aryan race. The Turks, Mongols, and Samoyeds all attribute it to their own heroes. I was last told it as a true local story by a Cypriot taxi driver in Paphos, the legendary birthplace of Venus. As the Swiss William Tell variety is easily found and known to many people, here for comparison is the version from the Vilkina saga, 3 centuries before Tell's time. A certain Palnatoke, for some time among King Harold's bodyguard, had made his bravery odious to very many of his fellow soldiers by the zeal with which he surpassed them in the discharge of his duty. This man once, when talking tipsily over his cups, had boasted that he was so skilled an archer that he could hit the smallest apple placed a long way off on a stick at the first shot, which talk, caught up at first by the ears of backbiters, soon came to the hearing of the king. Now mark how the wickedness of the king turned the confidence of the father to the peril of the son, by commanding that this dearest pledge of his life should be placed, instead of the stick, with a threat that, unless the author of this promise could strike off the apple at the first flight of the arrow, he should pay the penalty of his empty boasting by the loss of his head. The king's command forced the soldier to perform more than he had promised, and what he had said, reported by the tongue of slanderers, bound him to accomplish what he had not said. Nor did his sterling courage, though caught in the snare of slander, suffer him to lay aside his firmness of heart. Nay, he accepted the trial the more readily because it was hard. So Palnatoke warned the boy urgently, when he took his stand, to await the coming of the hurtling arrow with calm ears and unbent head, lest by a slight turn of his body he should defeat the practised skill of the bowman. And, taking further counsel to prevent his fear, he turned away his face, lest he should be scared at the sight of the weapon. Then, taking 3 arrows from the quiver, he struck the mark given him with the first he fitted to the string. But if chance had brought the head of the boy before the shaft, no doubt the penalty of the son would have recoiled to the peril of the father, and the swerving of the shaft that struck the boy would have linked them both in common ruin. I am in doubt then whether to admire more the courage of the father or the temper of the son, of whom the one by skill in his art avoided being the slayer of his child, while the other by patience of mind and quietness of body saved himself alive, and spared the natural affection of his father. Nay, the youthful frame strengthened the aged heart, and showed as much courage in awaiting the arrow as the father skill in launching it. But Palnatoke, when asked by the king why he had taken more arrows from the quiver, when it had been settled that he should only try the fortune of the bow once, made answer, "That I might avenge on thee the swerving of the first by the points of the rest, lest perchance my innocence might have been punished, while your violence escaped scot-free." The Boots of Hunain. There is a Middle Eastern proverb, the boots of Hunain, referring to something which is not such a bargain as it seems to be. This story, in its essentials and with remarkable fidelity of incident, is found all over the world. There is a Hebrew version, in which a Jewish cobbler outsmarts a desert Arab who has been rude to him, a Gaelic one from the Highlands of Scotland, and a Norwegian tale featuring a master thief. The modern Greek and German tales with this plot closely resemble the one from Bangladesh, while in England the tale is positively stated to have happened to a butcher in Lewes, Essex, though Lewes is in the county of Sussex. The following is the presentation found in Ibn Khallikan's monumental Wafayat, written in the 13th century, the first Arabian dictionary of biography. Its author himself came from a Central Asian family, where the story may have been current. There was once a desert Arab who rode into town and saw a pair of boots offered for sale in the market. He went into the shop and made an offer for them, but Hunain the shoemaker stuck to his price, and in the end the infuriated Bedouin stamped out of the shop. "The price you ask is equal to the value of my camel," he snorted. Now the shoemaker was deeply affronted by the behavior and language of this Arab, and decided that he would not let him get away with such insults. The Arab had mounted his camel and started along the trail towards the tents of his tribe. The shoemaker, knowing from where his would-be customer had come, picked up the boots and went by shortcuts to a point which the Arab would have to pass eventually. There he placed one boot on the sand. Then the shoemaker went a mile or more further along the road and dropped the other boot, hiding himself to watch what happened, for he had a plan. Presently the Arab came along and saw the first boot lying on the ground. He said to himself, "That is one of the boots of Hunain the cobbler. If only it were a pair, I would be able to get down and take them away for nothing." And he went on his way. After all, what was the use of one boot? Soon afterwards, of course, the Arab came upon the second boot. He thought, "What a pity I did not take up the first one. Then I would have had a pair." Then it occurred to him that he might go back for the first boot, then he would have them both. The Bedouin was some way from his own tents and did not want to tire his camel, so he hobbled it and ran back to the place where he had seen the first boot. The shoemaker came out of hiding, and, leaving the second boot where it was, he made off with the Arab's camel. When the Arab arrived back to the place where he had left his camel, he found it missing. Thinking it must have strayed, he made his way back to the tents of his people. "What have you brought back from town?" his fellow Bedouins asked as he limped into the settlement. "Only the boots of Hunain," said the miserable man.